My name is Arnold Richardson. I'm 82 years old. I was born June 16, 1938. I grew up in the North, went all through school in Philadelphia and New York. And my dad talked me into coming down here and told me there was nice women down here, and he convinced me to move down here, and that was in 1953. The first time I ever heard or knew anything about the Haliwa-Saponi. And I've been a musician practically all my life. I worked on a cruise ship when I was playing the drums on the cruise ship, went to Spain, Italy, France, Portugal, and Morocco. And my heart really poured out to the people in Morocco. They looked like me. And I was standing on the ship, and the passengers were told never go into Casablanca area of Morocco unless you go in a group. And I'm standing on the ship, and I looked down at well, they look like me. And so I didn't go with a group. I went by myself, and I saw these guys wearing these robes, and I bought one of those robes, and I went everywhere that they said don't go. I went all down into Casbah, and they didn't pay me any attention. They thought I was one of them.
Okay, but you became involved with the Haliwa-Saponi because your dad is Haliwa-Saponi, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and your grandpa or your uncle?
My uncle was my dad's brother, and he was the chief here.
He was the second chief here?
Yeah,
okay.
I didn't know anything about the first chief.
Okay, what was his name?
W.R. Richardson.
Okay.
William Robert Richardson.
Okay, so what I want you to do is just play the flute a little bit so that people could see your talent.
Okay.
And then we're going to go on to how you got involved with the Haliwa-Saponi people. I know your dad is Haliwa-Saponi and your uncle. So, and you hold two tribal cards, am I correct? You hold a Tuscarora and you hold a Haliwa-Saponi tribal card?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, go ahead and play your flute for us.
Okay. This first flute I ever had in my life, it's 100 years old, and a friend of mine, he's dead now, been dead a long time, named Tom Turros, gave me this flute, and he said, you look like a musician. I want you to learn to play the flute. So this is the flute that I learned on. The first one, it's over 100 years old, and I'll play a little bit of it for you. It has 6 holes, which represent 6 notes.
Beautiful. So you have been known for your flute playing, am I correct?
Well, yeah, over the past years, yeah.
Okay, and you have several awards behind this flute, correct?
Oh, yeah, I got one right behind you right there.
Okay, well...
Oh, it's not there.
You have, I think you put it over there.
It's over there somewhere.
Okay, so can you explain the first time you came down here with your dad, and what made you stay here amongst the Haliwa-Saponi people?
Well, I had people, the younger generation, they thought a lot of me back then. And they said, you need to come down here and teach us things. And that's what got me to move down here. I liked the people and the girls, they were real nice and cute. But I never really got involved with any of them, so to speak. And I decided to move down here. I said, yeah, they need me to teach them what Indian is. Well, they know what Indian is, but they don't know about Indian culture and traditions and the arts and all those things. So I came down here, and they had their first powwow, and I kind of frowned at that because it wasn't really what I was used to.
What didn't you like about it?
The regalia that they were wearing was not the true traditional regalia, and they just picked up and just started doing things that was just not what I was used to, and I started teaching them different songs, and I had the first drum that they ever heard at the powwow. Me and the guy down here that I took under my wing.
And who was that? What was his name?
His name was Theodis Lynch.
Okay. So you and Theodis, you actually were the first ones to drum at the powwow?
Absolutely.
And then how did the other drummers come to be?
Well, I had the first drum group here, and I taught some of the guys how to sing and taught them some of the songs. And then after a few years, well, I don't remember exactly when, but after a few years, then they started picking up and learning to drum on their own, and then they created the second drum group that was here.
How did you find out that the Tuscaroras were in this area?
Okay. Where I grew up and went to school up north in New York, and all my friends were Haudenosaunee. We say Haudenosaunee, which means Iroquois, and the Tuscarora were one of the Iroquois nations. That I heard that at one time they were in North Carolina, and that got my interest up. So when I came down here, and I did the first place I went where the Tuscaroras built a spring was at Magazine Springs, and that's in Halifax, North Carolina. And they built the spring there, and it's still there now. And that really perked my interest to do more research on the Tuscarora movement north.
Okay, so the Haliwa-Saponi people are comprised of different tribes. Am I correct?
So they say.
So what are some of the other tribes that are part of the Haliwa-Saponi people?
Okay. In my research, I found that it wasn't just Tuscarora, but there were Saponi Indians here. And then some years later, they adopted and acquired the name Saponi, which means red earth people. And then just in recent years, a young smart man that's a little bit beyond his knowledge, smart-wise, he did research, and I attest to that he found out some of the people came from the Nansemond Indians in Virginia. As I began to come down before I moved down, I found out that the Haliwa-Saponi, Haliwa was the name that they made up because they lived in the two counties, Halifax and Warren County. But they were actually descendants of other tribes that migrated. Some went over and became part of the Cherokee. Some were known as Nansemond Indians. And they just kind of migrated into this community that they said, well, this is where we belong. These are Indian people, and we're in Halifax and Warren County, so we'll call ourselves Haliwa Indians. And then some years later, when I was doing research, I found out that a lot of the blood was really Saponi, and then some of them were Nansemond Indians. People have asked me in past years, how do I know so much? Well, I was curious about the history of the people, so when I first moved down here, the first thing I did, I went to the state archives, and I got certified, and here's my card right here, North Carolina State Archives with my ID. I can go in the state archives and get any records I want. And that's when I started doing the research on the actual identity of the people here. And that's how I became so involved. And I started an Indian organization up in New York, and one of the first people that came up there and got involved was a Haliwa-Saponi Indian. His name was Haywood Lynch. And we became pretty well known as being radical Indians. Haywood Lynch came to New York and he learned about Indian organizations, and then he started an Indian organization in Philadelphia that was mostly Haliwa Indians that came from North Carolina that lived up in Philadelphia, and it was called UAIDV, and that was the Association of American Indians of the Delaware Valley, and most of those people were descendants of Haliwa-Saponi Indians that held their first powwow in Philadelphia, and through Haywood Lynch and my teaching him while he was in Philadelphia. But he's since passed on, and and his wife and I became real good friends. Her name was Mittie Lynch. She really is a Richardson.